everyone. My name is Dr. Deirdre Pfeiffer, and I am the instructor for Urban Housing Issues. This year, the graduate students in the course partnered with Project Cities and the City of Peoria to conduct a housing needs assessment of the City of Peoria. This assignment is enabling students to practice skills in gathering housing-related information from diverse sources, taking that information and analyzing it using quantitative and spatial analysis methods, as well as looking at social equity issues that can arise in housing, particularly uneven distributions of affordable housing within a community. A couple things to know about our assignment or our course this year. So Urban Housing Issues has some unique challenges for taking on these client-based projects because we're just a half semester course and we're online only. So the students have been very creative in finding ways to collaborate with one another on these diverse tasks in an online space. The students have all worked extremely hard on this assignment. I want to give a special shout out to Noah Schumerth, who is the project manager this year for the assignment. The project manager is a new role that allows students that have interest in going into management roles in planning the opportunity to practice their skills and develop a style of management through our Master of Urban and Environmental Planning program.
Hello, my name is Noah Schumerth. I'm a graduate student at the Masters of Urban and Environmental Planning program at Arizona State University. And I'm presenting on behalf of a group of 6 wonderful graduate students who are working together to build a housing needs assessment of the city of Peoria and looking at the state of the housing market there and beginning to work towards recommending some solutions for affordable housing in that community, both with this project and then supporting future projects which will look into that issue. I have a lot of content because our students have done a fantastic job of producing a great deal of information about the city of Peoria. So I'm going to run through it fairly quickly. I'm very open to questions at the end of the presentation. Feel free to leave any questions that you have about this demographic, economic, and housing market analysis, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. So let's begin. So first I'm going to start with a demographic analysis, really building the foundation for this housing needs assessment, looking at the environment that we are working in. So first, to just introduce the population of Peoria. Peoria has an aging population. It is a significantly smaller population of young people compared to broader Maricopa County, especially some of the larger municipalities such as Phoenix and Tempe, which have fairly young populations and drag the overall average population in the valley downward. This area is significantly older. Looking at the racial and ethnic makeup of the community, it's pretty heavily white. There's a great deal of white representation. However, there's a significant number of Hispanics and those who identify as Latinx, and that number is growing as well. And so you can see how Peoria compares to some of the averages in of both Maricopa County and the United States. Maricopa County has a significantly higher proportion of Hispanics than Peoria does, but like I said, that gap is closing based on our preliminary findings in this demographics analysis. Looking at household types, people are less likely to live alone than some of the other places in the valley, but you have more elderly people living alone than you see in a lot of other communities. You see lower rates of single parenting and cohabiting couples. It really looks like more of a traditional bedroom community as somebody might understand it, with a significantly higher number of married couples. But again, as with many maturing suburban communities in the United States, that is diversifying and that's beginning to change. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. Looking at household income, Peoria is has a somewhat higher median household income than the national average and the county-wide average as well. It also has a pretty large proportion of 6-figure households, which creates this environment where at first you might look at Peoria and say, do we really need to be looking at affordable housing? Especially as a primarily residential community as it stands right now, is this something we really need to be looking at? And we'll outline in this paper that absolutely it's something that needs to be looked at, and that you have these kind of diverging trends happening in Peoria at the same time that should be addressed. And then there's a great graphic showing how Peoria's economic composition compares to the valley and to the United States. You'll see that black chunk, that area that's 100,000 to 200,000 people, that is significantly larger, and a lot of that is also fueled by two-income households as well. So let's apply some of the broader sociological changes that are happening in the United States to the situation in Peoria and beyond. So it's no secret that millennials lag behind previous generations in terms of family generation, moving out, moving in with a spouse, having children. That traditional family production is a bit more delayed. And also, couples are having less children, although there's some research that suggests that this might change in the coming years. However, Peoria doesn't quite exhibit this same some of these same trends. They tend to be a little bit more family oriented, with those higher marriage rates and higher household sizes than we're seeing in Maricopa County as a whole and across the United States. So you can see that in this chart, that there's a significant gap between Peoria and these other samples that are being compared against, or populations rather, not samples. However, you can see that it does also follow some of these trends of how the composition and number of married couple families across the country. Many young people are choosing to live alone if able, and that's something that really needs to drive considerations for young people moving into Peoria or taking advantage of increasing housing options in the community. You're currently seeing the largest number of young adults living with parents. You're seeing just a very large number of young people living with parents, especially during the pandemic, where you have COVID closing colleges, you have COVID making entering the job market increasingly difficult, on top of the already existing factors that produce this trend, including large student debt, tight credit, increasing cost of housing, things such as that. Older populations, baby boomers tend to age in place. They're not looking to get rid of their homes all that quickly. They're already comfortable in their current neighborhood. And the spread of COVID in nursing facilities and some of these alternate living arrangements have really accelerated the trends of boomers staying in place. They're not looking to go, they're not looking to move from the current home. So those homes are not entering the market. There's this real stability of that population in places like Peoria. And immigration continues to rise. And while Peoria has a significantly lower foreign-born population than many other communities in the valley, and it remains under 10%, that is beginning to turn around in the last 5 years. And there is now what was a slight decrease, as you see in that graph between 2010 and 2015, that's now starting to grow. So Peoria is beginning to participate very slowly in the rise of immigration and the rise of foreign-born populations in American cities. So let's talk about the state of housing very quickly. And I know I'm limited on time, so I'm going to try to keep moving as fast as I can. So Peoria's housing market dominated by single-family homes. You'll see that of the 73,000 units that are in Peoria, about 57,000 are single-family homes. It's about just under 80%. The vast majority of these homes were built between 1980 and 2013. And what this is resulting in is right now there's very little down filtering happening in Peoria. And any down filtering that was happening where these homes are, there's new luxury products being put on the market and then other homes are filtering down the market. Any of that has been largely reversed by this hot housing market that we're in. We'll talk about in a moment. You will see that for housing stock and housing flow, looking at how homes are moving in Peoria, you are seeing a trend that's across the United States. Residential listings are at an all-time low. You are seeing in the hundreds now across the entire city of Peoria, which is not a small city. It's very low. And that median home price is skyrocketing. Just in the last 5 years, you're seeing increases of almost, over $100,000, almost $150,000 in that median home sale price. I mean, these are real radical shifts in the housing market in Peoria. You're seeing a vacancy rate of 9.3%, which is slightly above what's considered a dangerous vacancy rate of 5%, which is seen as a severe housing shortage. The rental vacancy rate looks a little bit more like the rest of the valley, looking at about 8%. and a homeowner vacancy rate that is significantly lower, about 1.3%, as reflected in the fact that people are buying homes essentially sight unseen, just getting into that housing market that is extremely hot. There's very few units available right now. That's what that data reflects. There is real housing burden based on a definition of cost burden, where housing costs are over 30% of annual income. You're seeing that about 32% of renters of these renting households are housing burden. Again, rent, it's going to overwhelmingly affect the rental market, although you're also going to see increasingly that, especially during COVID, that many people who have a mortgage are also rent burdened. And this number is growing as the price for rents and the price for homes increase dramatically. And to be anywhere in the housing market right now, especially if you want to try to stay in a community, is going to be increasingly expensive. So we expect that number to rise in the near future and to continue to rise. Even though, I include that chart up there that compares Peoria's composition in terms of owner-renter dichotomy to Maricopa County as a whole. The reason why I include that is to show that while the rental population is small relative to Maricopa County, it's about 25% versus 37%. This is still very important. Even if 32% of renters are a cost burden, that is not a small number of the Peoria population, and we will need to take steps to address that going forward. So I'm largely just going to skim through the national trends, just because I think talking about Peoria and what's happening there is the most important thing to cover in the limited time that I have with you. There's been this long-term move to the suburbs. We see this back to the city movement, which is true, is happening in certain areas, but you are still seeing this push out to the suburbs, even though suburbs are changing and starting to look more like cities. And to be fair, some cities are also starting to look like suburbs. That move out to the suburbs is driven by historically low interest rates and these demographic trends. And obviously COVID has thrown a whole new variable into that, and has, based on a preference for less density, more space, working from home, and the facilities to do that. The COVID-19 pandemic has really fueled this move out to the suburbs. The suburban markets didn't absorb all of the growth in the housing market in 2020 because cities are growing as well. They're not growing as fast, but they're still growing at a significant rate. Everywhere right now is growing, and you're seeing similar price increases in a lot of different environments, not just suburban, but urban and exurban as well, although to different degrees. Suburban homes are selling for above the listed price more often than compared to urban areas. So again, this extremely hot housing market and this pressure to produce new units and this incredibly low vacancy rate is most certainly afflicting suburban communities like Peoria, more so than even urban places like Phoenix or Tempe or some of these other more built up areas. Suburban single family rentals prices are skyrocketing as well due to increased demand, and it's following suit with rental properties in recent years, seeing massive spikes in costs. So let's talk about an issue that's come up during this housing needs assessment, and that is multi-generational housing. And looking at how Peoria fits into this picture of multi-generational housing, which is only becoming more important as the pandemic goes on. So the largest generation in Peoria is the baby boomer generation. It's almost a quarter of the city's population. As mentioned, this age group, they're going to age in place. They're less likely to downsize. Many of their homes are going to remain off the market. That is going to have significant impacts on the housing market that is going to set the stage for thinking about multi-generational housing. It's creating different, so not only is it also affecting the market, but it's all in how young people are able to enter the market, how the housing market adjusts to this lack of new units being put on the market, but there's also demographic changes that happen with that. So one example is the rise of grandchildren living with grandparents. That's rising in Peoria. You have over 3,000 households. That's almost 4,000 now, 10 years later from when that measurement was first taken. Peoria also has a higher percentage of married couple families and families that may wish to be host for older people who may need to go to some sort of assisted living facility, but may not be able to, may also be taking care of children who can't enter the job market or may be at home due to closed college facilities, things like that. And so there's this growing need for multi-generational housing, and Peoria has a lot of the conditions that make it right for providing multi-generational housing products. That can look in a variety of different forms, from traditional duplex units to some of what the housing builders nationally are providing, like Lennar's Next Gen units, Enrichment Americans, flexible dual unit home products. Or that can look like accessory dwelling units or other accessory buildings. So there's different ways that can look, but it's clearly becoming a need in the city of Peoria. The city of Peoria is ripe to capture some of the demand for that type of housing. So looking at future directions for this project, what does affordable housing look like for various age groups? That's something that we really need to understand. Age groups, but then also income groups as well, and looking at the relationship between those. So households age 25, above 25 and under, or I'm sorry, households under 25 and over 65 have the highest percentage of households with income under $25,000. These are groups that really need targeted affordable housing actions, and we will be taking significant steps to look at how they're being served by the Peoria housing market today. Middle-aged households have that highest percentage of the households in Peoria that have an income of over $100,000. They may have less need for affordable housing interventions and being targeted by some of these programs that that we might be looking at, or changes in the housing market that should be led by by public stakeholders and by nonprofits and some of the movers in shifting the housing market and providing new options for affordable housing. It's worth noting, though, that this group may also serve as a potential jumping off point to provide things such as multi-generational housing and other components of an affordable, diverse housing economy that'll help Peoria be a more sustainable place to live in the far-term future. And so again, this graph might look a little confusing to the right, but it really shows that bell curve that occurs where people under 25 and over 65 are especially susceptible to have pretty low incomes and need to be thought about carefully in a broader picture of affordable housing. So just to conclude, going forward, something that we are going to be looking at is in our housing needs assessment, and what we're going to be adding to this yet beyond the data that I've presented to you today is a fair housing analysis. We're going to look a little more closely at neighborhood conditions and services, really try to apply some of these findings to a more geographical analysis, looking at the distribution of income, looking at the distribution of neighborhood services, and all sorts of different amenities in the city of Peoria, and really trying to overlay that onto some of the data that we've talked about here as well. We'll also be mapping, doing a little bit more of mapping that housing data. I know I'll be working with the city of Peoria myself to get some more permit data and really get a more in-depth look at the construction trends in the city of Peoria and the types of housing that are coming online and how that's shaping the housing market. There'll be more economic data analysis, how the economy of Peoria is shifting and what that means for housing, how that'll interact with some of the trends and data we've talked about here. And as I've been alluding to, applying more of these national housing trends to these local conditions in Peoria in a way that's going to help future students, whether it's through Project Cities or through planning capstone classes or anything like that, be able to apply national or be able to prescribe more meaningful interventions in housing to for the city of Peoria as it looks to provide a more affordable and more sustainable housing market in the coming decades. So there'll be a final report with this that will be done in early May and will be produced along with the rest of the ASU Project Cities work that's being done this semester with Peoria. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the data trends, about national trends. I know our students have done such a good job of collecting a lot of data. There's so much more that's in this presentation. So if you have any questions or any ideas about what you would like to see, what you'd like to learn more about, please feel free to add them to the end of this presentation. Thank you for your time. And it's been great to be a part of this project with the City of Peoria.